We got two bad teams, but guess what? We still got NFL action. We're going to enjoy the Raiders and the Jaguars crossover here. Locked on Jaguars and Locked on Raiders.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Exactly right. It is your team every day here on Locked On Raiders and Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. Reminding you that Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And I want to let y'all know, man, that we got a big show for you today. We're going to hit keys to victory late, big storylines for both teams, and then we're just going to preview Jags and Raiders. I got my buddy. I always say this. I say my boy Q. It's your boy Q, but when I talk about him, I say my boy Q, and people go typing it up, and they're like, I don't know who that. Where's my boy Q? That's not even popping up. Quay Myers, what's going on with your busy self, man?
Hey, man, I'm staying busy. That's a good thing, right? Just excited to be on the show here with you. And we're talking about a couple teams that are not good, two teams that are going to be picking high in the draft in 2025 in April. But it's still a football game. And look, this is what we do. So let's have some fun with it.
Let's have some fun. Let's have us a good time. Let me just ask you about the Raiders first. You can get on me with the Jags later on. What happened? This seemed like to me the way this set up. This was a fall guy year, right? So now the fall guy might get fallen on in Antonio Pierce with the things that we're hearing, the rumblings that we're hearing today. I thought in the offseason last year, everything they did was like a one-year move. I didn't like Getsy. I didn't like the offensive coordinator. I didn't like the choice of quarterbacks. There's a lot of goodwill that this team had when Antonio Pierce came in and sort of took over because they played so hard. It kind of reminded me of the early stages of the Detroit Lions. What has happened?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll tell you, I'm always the guy that says don't hire the interim coach because just don't get the good results. But I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to admit I was sold. I said, hey, man, look, this guy about 3 weeks into him being the interim, I said, this guy is bringing back the Raider mystique. He's changing the culture. The team, as you mentioned, is playing really hard for him. They want to play for him. And every time we're in the locker room, the players are saying, give him another year, give him 2 years. We can get things turned around here. He's the right guy for the job. And I believed it. And unfortunately, we've seen the results of what this season has been. And it looks like they really put it on the line. And he was really coaching really well. I felt the interim year, it just hasn't come to fruition this year, and it's really unfortunate. There's no guarantee what's going to happen at the end of the season. There's rumblings that he could be one and done. There's potential that he could come back. Tom Brady might have a big role in this. I mean, there's a lot of question marks out there. But I'll tell you this, man, from what I saw on Monday Night Football, my own eyes at Allegiant Stadium, it didn't look good. It looked very uninspiring. And for the first time this year, it felt like that was the end. It just felt like there was no energy, no juice in the building. You're at home and you couldn't generate really any excitement. It didn't feel right to me. So there's a lot of people around the league that believe that he'll be one and done, and Tom Brady will go and help decide who's going to be the next head coach. But I hate that for AP. He's a really good dude, but it just doesn't seem like it's working out as far as being the head coach of the Raiders.
So the funny thing is they went with the interim this time, but when it was Rich Bisaccia, they didn't do it. And I just had this conversation with Ross Jackson because they're talking about giving Rizzy a shot down there right now. And I'm thinking like, Ross, it never, ever works. I mean, we saw it with Romeo Crennel when he took over for Herman Edwards. We saw it with a lot of people. Or Romeo Crennel may have taken over for the other guy that used to coach golf that went up there with Pittsburgh. But I know he took over and they gave him the job and it felt good. And dudes at the barbershop were joking with me saying, hey, I heard you got the Raiders, the Kansas City job because they said I looked like Romeo Crennel and I wanted to fight. But leave it up to people to pick at you about somebody getting work, right? But the thing is, for me, is I try to look at him and I try to figure out what's wrong. So when Devontae Adams got traded, I'm like, that's not a good sign because that's a Hall of Famer who wanted to be there. He ain't doing no better where he went.
Right.
But Brock Bowers, man, let me tell you, I'm going to start right there. If you want to look at a bright spot, that's it. I ain't say that. I said that's it with a D-A-S because he is every single thing we thought he would be. And to me, he fits perfectly with the culture that the Raiders want to cultivate.
No, he does. There's no doubt. And he's actually been way more than I thought he was going to be. I knew he was really good coming out of Georgia, knew that he could be a big-time playmaker. But once Devontae left, I was interested to see how much attention he was going to get from opposing defenses and how he was going to deal with that. And Wig, he's been doing fantastic. I mean, he's leading, receiving yards and catches for rookies and tight ends. He's breaking records, and I mean, he's so humble about it. He's not one of those braggadocious dudes. Every once in a while, you'll see him celebrate when he makes a big catch. But in the locker room, when we ask him about breaking different records, I just want to win games, and he's not going to say too many words. But he'll let all his play go out there and really do the talking. He's been fantastic. When you look at the Raiders and you look at, where they're going to move forward, how they're going to move forward, the one thing you do know is you got that guy, Brock Bowers. So no matter who ends up throwing him the rock, whether it's someone that's on the roster right now or someone that they go and get in April, they've got an ace in the hole right there in Brock Bowers. He is definitely weapon number one.
He is just a pure football player. Gronk, George Kittle. He's just one of those dudes, man. I saw a picture of him at the combine. Dude had on some white ankle socks with some black Air Force Ones that weren't tied up, and I said, "Oh yeah, he's the dog. They got one." I'm telling you. What else is going on with the team, man? What can if there's one thing, obviously outside of quarterback, I knew Gardner Minshew was the answer. By the way, we had him here in Jacksonville, and Gardner is one of those dudes now. If you just look down at the paper and look at the numbers, when people say numbers don't lie, I always say, yeah, but they'll tell the whole story either. Gardner's a stat guy, and you look at it, it's like, oh, okay, wait a minute, 69% completion percentage, interception, touchdown to interception ratio looks well, threw for 390. That ain't it, though. Sometimes Gardner will set those receivers up to get decapitated, and that is the one thing that he plays off schedule a little bit too much. You got to force him to play on schedule, and when you do, you see his deficiencies.
Well, I'll tell you this, man. I mean, the offense has just been on the struggle bus all season long, starting with Luke Getsy as the OC. Gardner Minshew started out as a starting quarterback. Then Aiden O'Connell became the quarterback. Then he hit IR. Then Gardner Minshew came back. Then Desmond Ridder came in for a game. And it looks like Aiden O'Connell's trending back to being able to be back into action coming up on Sunday against the Jaguars. So it'll probably be the Aiden O'Connell show. And look, for my money, I'm just waiting to see improve and let everyone see that, okay, he's a guy that's probably a really good backup, but he's not your franchise quarterback in the National Football League. I do believe that the Raiders have to go into the draft to go get their guy. It's going to start there. But Aiden O'Connell has done some good things. He's shown that he can win some games in the National Football League, but the consistency is not there. So that's one of the issues. Again, now they're on their interim offensive coordinator and Scott Turner, and he's done some pretty good things, even though Monday night, that game, that had a lot to be desired. And maybe that was because Desmond Ridder was the quarterback. I don't know, but you know how it is, man. If you're on quarterback 3, if you're on OC 2, if you're on offensive line coach 2, right, you're not doing well. If your number one weapon is asked for a trade and he's now in New York, and then you got a rookie that you're relying on, and Brock Bowers, who's been fantastic, but I mean, it's just so many moving parts. The running back that they were having success with has said on Instagram that he's out for the season because of an ankle injury. So it's just one thing after the other, and the Lions fans aren't gonna say, well, hey, the Raiders have it bad, because Lions are really hit with the injury bug in a major way. So nobody's gonna feel sorry for any team in the league when they're hit with the injury bug. But it just seems like everything that the Raiders are trying to deal with this year is just too much, and they're not handling it well, and that's why they only have 2 wins on the season.
And you know what's funny about that? Normally, you could probably get away with the injury thing, but with Detroit having 792 guys on injury reserve, and it's like your owner ain't gonna he ain't taking no excuses. No. All right, real quick, I got to do this. Are the people out there hoping that the Giants can somehow win a game and y'all can secure the number 1 pick and take your pick of quarterbacks? Is it gonna be Shador? Is it gonna be Cam Ward? Will they go Hollywood? And well, you go Hollywood, we should do it too, but will they go Hollywood and take the dual threat? They had Charles Woodson before, and the Davises love to stick with things that they knew worked before, speed, and then having somebody that's similar to Charles Woodson in Travis Hunter. It's got to be the quarterback.
I think it's got to be the quarterback. For my money, it's Shador. I'm team Shador, and I know that Cam Ward is a phenomenal quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I think Shador would be perfect in Las Vegas for many different reasons. I think the Raiders need a star on the offensive side of the ball that is a guy that's a little braggadocious, a guy that will put some butts in the seats. People want to see what it's going to look like. I think he'd be great for just the all in all, just the team in general. He has a great relationship with Tom Brady. Tom Brady is part owner now. He's going to have something to say with who who the quarterback, and if you listen to Mark Davis, he's going to have a lot to do with what the personnel looks like next season. So watch out for that. I just think Shedeur makes too much sense. But if they end up with Cam Ward, so be it. But yeah, I mean, Raider Nation, for the most part, they all want to get that number 1 overall pick now. So there's no doubt on that they can go get their quarterback. If they don't end up with number 1, they may have to do some moving and shaking here or there, or hoping that Dion and Shedeur say they don't want to go to the Giants and end up in Vegas. But for me, it feels like if you connect the dots, Shedeur is going to be a Vegas Raider quarterback when it's all said and done.
Connects the dots too with me, especially with Brady. Let me ask you real quick before we move on to segment 2, where I tell you about the circus and the dumpster fires going on down here. Is there some kind of conflict with Tom Brady sitting on TV and then making decisions for a team? That's kind of weird, isn't it?
It's very weird. And, you know, they've got all these rules for him, what he can't do, what he can't do. But look, he's Tom Brady, and what's to say he doesn't have relationships with everybody in the league, and people are just calling him anyway, giving him whatever kind of information. It's weird. Mark Davis said at the owner meeting that when they made this arrangement that they weren't going to get in the way of his broadcasting at Fox. I don't know how that's going to work, especially if he's going to be a personnel guy and really have a lot to say with how this team is put together. So we'll see how long this lasts. To me, it doesn't feel like you can do both and do it at a high level. It's either one or the other. But again, that's just me.
I totally agree with you. All right, we're going to switch this thing around, and I'm going to get on the witness stand, and I'm going to tell you right now, it ain't going to be easy, baby. Go easy on me, Q. I'm telling you, man, it's going to get rough. We'll talk more about the Jaguars and the Raiders playing this weekend in Las Vegas in just a second here on a crossover edition of Locked on Jaguars and Locked on Raiders. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by the College Football Playoff, which is back. And with a newly expanded 12-team format, is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, SMU. That's right. The Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers looked to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Today's show is also sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. That's right. FanDuel is the absolute truth, man. And if you know, like I know, you need to get on over there. I know the end of the year is coming and it is upon us. But guess what? Does not matter. You can have a chance to win you some Skrill over on FanDuel. This is the largest, biggest, baddest, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can get and bet $5. If you bet $5, you can get $150 in bonus bets if your team wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live, play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, rolling along here with your boy Q is my boy Q. It's time, man. All right, I'm on the witness stand. I'm sworn in. Go ahead and give it to me. What you got?
I mean, look, when you look at the Jaguars, and I feel like this is probably the story that's been for a few years, right? I mean, Trevor Lawrence is the guy that's supposed to come and save the day, and it hasn't worked out quite that way. So now he's with Doug Peterson. Obviously, there was a total letdown when it came to Urban Meyer there, but okay, that's way behind him. No problem. Clear, set. They spend money. They bring in Trevor Lawrence, and all's going to be good with Doug Peterson. What has gone wrong? Why has it gone wrong? And is it ever going to get right with Trevor Lawrence being the can't-miss prospect at that quarterback position?
Trevor hasn't played as bad as people think. It's just that the expectations were so high. What happened is he's supposed to be the next Andrew Luck. If you go back, Andrew Luck early on didn't play as well as everybody thought he was going to play either. A lot of quarterbacks have gone through that. Trevor hasn't been Jameis Winston-like, but he has a propensity to trust his arm so much that he makes some mistakes. He leads the league in turnovers since he's been in the league. Not necessarily interceptions, tip balls, Hail Marys, fumbles. When he runs, he fumbles the ball a lot. I think the biggest problem with the team is I think they're soft. And everybody around the league that talks about the Jaguars that have either played the game or coached the game, they call them soft. And that's hard to believe when Trent Baalke is such a physical traits guy. But it is what it is. To give you a hint of what's going on. Okay, they got Brandon Sheriff at right guard, who they gave a little bit of they gave him a big deal, and then they cut it back, they scaled it back a little bit, but he's still making pretty decent money. You got a right tackle, Anton Harrison, who's on a rookie deal. You got Mitch Morse, who's now a journeyman coming from Buffalo. He makes about $5 million a year. Your left guard is a dude Ezra Cleveland, that you traded for at the trade deadline a year ago when he was going to be a free agent. You gave him a little sweetheart deal for like $4 million, like $29 million. And Walker Little, who you drafted in the second round in 2021, is just now being a full-time starter because they traded Cam Robinson to Minnesota. And Walker Little just got an extension, which the Jaguars almost never do. But it's a 3-year, $40 million deal. Now get this. If you have Trevor Lawrence, why don't you get a security force? But what they have is they keep playing these scout games like they're going to find a bargain. You don't find a bargain when you're trying to protect a young quarterback who you just gave $275 million. And I said this just yesterday on my pod. Doug Peterson had Jason Peters, arguably a first ballot Hall of Famer at left tackle. He had Jason Kelsey. We know he's a first ballot with a bullet. Lane Johnson's going to the Hall of Fame whenever he decides to hang it up. He had 3 first ballot Hall of Famers potentially on that team when he beat New England, when he beat Belichick and he beat Brady. You cannot win in this league if you cannot impose your will at some point with your offensive line. With all due respect to the Rams, they still had wit, even though he was old. That dude might go to Canton. And they could design the game and design things up the way they get the ball out real quick with Matt Stafford. So you can't win consistently if you can't block people and beat people. And now that the game has sort of trended back to the physicality of the 80s and the 90s with Detroit, with Philly, with Kansas City, maybe doing it by force because they can't score a whole bunch of points. It is all about blocking, tackling, and running. And teams are not just letting wide receivers run free and loose like it's 7-on-7 anymore. So when you're not physical and the game changes back to a physical brand, you get left behind. And that's what's happening with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So the way that they're sitting right now, and at one point they, looked like they had the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming draft. I know after winning the game, they dropped a little bit, but what's the outlook? What's the goal at the end of this season? What are Jaguar fans looking for? And what do you do with that top pick? You're obviously not going to get a quarterback. Are you trying to trade it back? Are you trying to get a skill position, offensive line, as you mentioned? What are you doing with that top pick, wherever that ends up being, 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever the case may be?
All right. So here's the thing. First of all, before we even do anything with that top pick, Jaguar fans want to make sure the person who has been making the picks here is out. They do not want Trent Baalke here any longer. They want a clean sweep. If you're going to get rid of Doug, get rid of Trent, start completely over, which is something Shad Khan, other than the Urban Meyer situation, he's never really done it. And he didn't really do it then because Baalke was the assistant GM the year before when he fired Dave Caldwell. He then hired Baalke, retained him to work with Urban. So he's never really made a clean sweep. Even when he took the team over with Dave Caldwell, they kept Mike Mularkey for 1 year. So he has to do something he has never done. He has to do what he does with that soccer team over in England and say, you know what? Just get rid of everybody. Start over. Everybody wants to maybe go after Ian Cunningham, the assistant GM with the Bears, and then possibly either Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson, and just totally start over. But they want an offense. This is the funniest part. We need an offensive-minded coach to help work with Trevor. What the hell is Doug Peterson? Everybody gets so caught up thinking that like the thing you're asking for is the thing that you're getting rid of. So, we'll have to see what happens. They want to be like Detroit, but they don't understand that Dan Campbell didn't play quarterback. He played tight end. And culture comes in different shapes and different forms. The Jaguar fan bases are great. You'll see it. They'll be there this weekend, probably in Vegas. And the thing is, man, I want for them to win so bad, but I got a feeling the only way they're going to do that is to start this thing completely over, which is something the owner has yet to do.
Man, that's going to be really interesting. It's funny you mentioned Jaguar fans, and I experienced that firsthand when the Raiders closed out the Oakland Coliseum some years back before they moved to Vegas. That was the last game that they played was the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Gardner Minshew was the quarterback at the time. And even though I didn't like the outcome of the game, I didn't think that it was the right call. I thought the officials got involved. I saw so many Jaguar fans there in Oakland, and and this is not a disrespect, I just didn't know. I didn't know they traveled like that, but they traveled in a major way. So you're expecting a lot of Jaguar representation on Sunday at Allegiant Stadium.
I absolutely am. Shout out to the Bold City Brigade. That is who that is. And they represent Jacksonville in every single way, every place that they go.
They represented for sure. I got to give them that props.
And they weren't scared either. They weren't scared of Oakland. They ain't worried about the people. I'm telling you, the worst Raider fans you ever want, the Jaguar fans. The one thing about Jaguar, some dude from the Seahawks a few years ago acted like he wanted to run into the stands. He was 300 pounds, but I guarantee you when he left those stands, he'd have been $120. These people don't play about that, man. I'm telling you, if the team fought like the fans were willing to fight, man, we might have had 3 or 4 Super Bowls by now. But speaking of which, we're going to talk about this game, talk about the keys to victory. If somebody got to win, Q, you know what I'm saying? So we're going to talk about the keys to victory, the draft ramifications, and all of that. We'll get to it here in the third and final segment. Crossover edition of Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Raiders. All right, today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Hillsdale College. It's never too late to start learning. It's never too late to start learning and figuring out a lot of things, like how precious time is and how you can't waste it all the time just sitting on social media. How about enlightening your mind at Hillsdale College? Our sponsor actually offers more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution. That might be real relevant right now. Introduction to free market economics, the great American story, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, and more. All of Hillsdale courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in whenever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. This is what you got to do. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's Hillsdale, HILLSDALE.edu/locked-on to register. Once again, it is hillsdale.edu/locked-on. All right, man, we're rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Raiders. Of course, today's show and all of our shows across our Thursday podcasting network here on the Locked On Podcast Network is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, game predictions. I ain't going to even try to predict the score. Let's do this. Let's do a baseball score. 2-1. How about that, right? Yeah, man. We got to find some juice in Vegas. If anything, Vegas ain't missing juice. So when you said they lack juice, I'm like, in Vegas, maybe the juice is what they had, and that's why they played like they couldn't play.
I don't know, but it was 15-9 Monday Night Football, Falcons and Raiders. Like, that is the most uninspiring game, and the Falcons got something to play for. They're trying to, get into the playoffs, and even they couldn't generate any juice. So shame on them, shame on the Raiders. I don't know, man. This is going to be an interesting game. Like I said earlier, I feel like Aiden O'Connell is trending in the right direction to get back out there. So if there's something to look for, and that's what I've been kind of doing the last few weeks, not really even talking about who's going to win or lose, because I just don't know, to be honest with you, and I don't want to represent the actual expectations of the game. But I'll just say straight up, to see if Aiden O'Connell could get adapted to what Scott Turner is doing as the offensive coordinator. Can Scott Turner be the offensive coordinator long term, or is the conversation about him possibly joining Bill Belichick in North Carolina, is that real? Is that something that he's already thinking of? I'll say this: the offense didn't look very good after that report came out, so I don't know if you could tie 2 and 2 together, or if it's the fact that he was with Desmond Ridder as the quarterback. So there's that. I just want to really see who can step up, that's a young player that could show that they can be a part of this team moving forward. And then, as we talked about Brock Bowers so much in segment number 1 and what he's able to bring to the table, I'm hoping he could break some records, man. There's a few more records that are still there to be had. Puka Nacua, as a rookie, had 105 receptions, and Brock Bowers is at 90. So that's not a whole lot away. I mean, he can catch them in 3 games. And I think that Brock Bowers should be a guy you target 10 times anyway, but the last couple games, it hasn't been that for the Silver and Black. So I'd like to see Brock Bowers get a heavy dose of targets and maybe come away with a heavy dose of catches and get that much closer to Puka Nacua. Again, it's been a season where it's been disappointing, but he has been everything but disappointing. He has been fantastic. I'd love to see him go ahead and continue to get the the awards and the accolades as a rookie.
So check this out. Non-quarterbacks, because everybody talks about Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers, I did Locked On the NFL yesterday, and I said that Brian Thomas Jr. was going to win the Rookie of the Year, and David Harrison for the Commander said, no, he isn't. But he was talking about Jaden or Bo.
Yeah.
I did not know Brock Bowers almost had 100 catches. But let me get a load of this. If the draft was tomorrow, Brian Thomas Jr. would go top 5. Let me show you his stats. 64 receptions, 956 yards with 8 touchdowns, and he's played like 4 games without Trevor Lawrence. That's pretty damn good for that kid that was picked 23rd overall here in Jacksonville. So one of the things we can look at, and then they force-fed him the ball the other day. He had 10 catches. So we can at least get this view of these 2 fabulous rookies that I believe, barring injury, have a very, very big future. 2 SEC guys have a very big future in the National Football League. I'm going to go out on a limb. The Jaguars have enough to win because Trayvon Walker is very, very good. Trayvon Walker might make the Pro Bowl this year. Trayvon Walker in the last 2 years has like 19 sacks, and we still got 3 games to go. So I think he's their best defensive player. Brian Thomas Jr. is their best offensive player. And Mac Jones, while he's probably a career backup, and that has been substantiated by the way he plays sometimes, he's still very, very capable. Their offensive line is gelling, even though they're never going to be good enough, I believe, to win a championship unless they make changes. The Jaguars have some pieces, and they've been in a lot of close games, and they just find different ways to lose a game, which can be discouraging. But it sounds like it's way better than what the Raiders got. It's like the Raiders are just totally off the rails.
I mean, they're just it's not a good thing right now. And they fight hard, right? They play hard. Even the results, if you look at some of the scores, you say, oh, man, they got blown out. Not really. It just the wheels fell off at the very end. Even the game on Monday against the Falcons, I mean, look, they're 2 Hail Marys away from winning that game. I mean, they threw it into the end zone. The first one sailed out. The second one got intercepted, but they literally could have won that game. So it's been some tough losses for the Raiders. I feel like that they've got a lot of weight on their shoulders from this season, and it's just starting to crack through. It's starting to be too much, right, from all the changes that they've had and all the injuries that they've dealt with and changes at the quarterback position, who's in now, who's not in. It's been a lot. Jacoby Myers in the locker room told me that it's been a lot, right? He's just, and that's fair. So they're trying to get to the finish line. They're going to give them everything that they've got. Mac Jones almost, pulled the Jaguars over the Jets on Sunday. Almost had that victory. I thought that they were going to win that one. I'm sure Raider Nation was actually rooting for the Jaguars to win that one for multiple reasons. One, so they could just win another game, and 2, so the Jets and Devontae Adams lose another one. But they pulled that one out at the end. So there's no love lost there between the Raiders and Devontae. So that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, man, I mean, the Jaguars, they've got talent, as you know. So it should be at the very least an interesting game come Sunday.
They lost 12-7 to Minnesota about 3 weeks ago. That's just who they are, man. They'll play you and they'll get into the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden, Murphy's Law, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. So here's the $1 million question: not who's going to win, whose fan base wants them to win. Because the Jaguars, they want to beat everybody. They don't care about draft selections. They feel like Balky's going to mess it up anyway. And then they're coming off of a year where they pick maybe the 3rd or 4th best player in the draft. In a lot of people's opinion, they got him at 23. So it's almost like, don't let him pick early. Let him fall down and pick late so something will fall to him. You guys, your fans probably don't want to win this game at all, though, because that knocks them even further back from the quarterback scenario that they like.
Yeah, for the most part, most of Raider Nation is not rooting for a win. They're not. And I say this all the time. I'm never going to pull for a loss. It's just not in me. I'm just not going to root for a loss. But when the Raiders lose these days, it's a lot more acceptable, right? It's a lot more acceptable because you know what the end result could potentially be. Like you have in Jacksonville, you have your franchise quarterback. The Raiders haven't had a franchise quarterback in quite a bit. They had Derek Carr for 9 years, and he stabilized the position. But when you've got Mahomes, Herbert, and now Bo Nix in your division, you want that difference maker. So I think that they need to go get that guy, but I'm not going to actively campaign for them to lose games because it's just not in me, and it's not really in Raider Nation. But I think a lot more the fan base is saying, yeah, I'm okay. If they lose, I can deal with that. It's not a problem.
All right. So you asked me the question, who would it be? Lately, Travis Hunter's kind of hit. He don't want to come down here. So the one thing about Jaguar fans, if you act like you don't want to be here, they don't want you. So they're going probably, you see a lot of people talk about the corner from Michigan, the tall kid.
Okay.
The other kid at Michigan, Mason Graham, the defensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm hearing a little bit of Tretoria McMillan talk to pair him with Brian Thomas Jr., the next Mike Evans, some people think. So they can't go wrong either way if they end up with a really good player. Q-Man is real, man. We're going to see what happens this weekend. And we thank you for watching Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Raiders. Make sure you tap into the game. I'll do a postcast for Locked On Jaguars after the game. I don't know if Q has any plans to do a postcast. Q probably ain't no telling where you're going to be at, man.
I'll be everywhere
with a microphone. Ain't no way. You probably on a rocket ship somewhere doing a radio show. So that's what you're always doing. But one of my good friends from around the network, and I'm glad we don't get a good chance to talk too often, but when we do, we have a good time. All right, Jaguar fans, Raider fans, have a good, safe game. We appreciate you here on Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. You guys take care of each other, and we will do the same.